What's good, y'all? It's your girl Ebony, your dialysis coworker. I want to talk about some mistakes that I have made as a dialysis technician. Okay, I could not think of every single mistake because I feel like I've made so many mistakes. I know you have too. So let's just jump right on into it because y'all know I don't waste no time. Let's talk about it. All right. So one mistake that I've made is I'm gonna come back to that. I'm gonna go with my first mistake, the transducer's not being tight enough. I remember it was like my first week of having my own two patients. So with Fresenius at the time, I don't know what they do now, but at the time, the training was you get two patients and then you progress to your four or whatever. But this was like maybe your second month in. First month you're watching, but it really depends on what clinic you're at. I'm just saying. So, anyways, transducer not tight enough. Go over to the machine. The transducer in the line is doing this. And I was like, and there's blood everywhere. Mind you, the patient is knocked out. So that was like good and bad because it was my first interaction with something like that happening. And I'm thinking the patient's gonna be mad or the patient's gonna be freaking out. They were asleep. So that's one thing. Another thing is letting my saline bag dry. That means all of your saline, you didn't clamp your line. You didn't clamp one of your lines or none of your lines. I didn't clamp none of my lines. It was my first and only time I've ever done that. And they was always telling me like certain mistakes, you gonna make them one time and you won't ever make them again. That was one of them because that particular patient, that means I added saline to the patient. When I tell you freaking out, and this was in the same week, by the way, okay? Freaking out. And my preceptor, she was so calm. She was just like, um, pointed to the bag. It was empty. And I was like, what does that mean? She was like, all your saline gone. And she had clamped the line. I was like, oh my God. So, of course, you got to get that off the patient. Honestly, she didn't tell me to tell the patient that had happened. She didn't. So I don't remember telling the patient that happened. You should, okay? I said it to say you should tell the patient when there's a mishap and make sure you have somebody with you because you don't know how crunk they're going to get with you, okay? The next mistake that I made is the blood lines not being tight enough on the dialyzer. So, you set up your machine. You got red. This is the setup. Red on the bottom, blue on the top. But eventually, either before you start treatment, I like to flip my dialyzer before I start treatment to avoid air. That's another mistake I made. Got air in my lines plenty of times. So I like to flip my dialyzer to avoid air. But I also monitor and look and assess the dialyzer to make sure there's no air in it, even after I flip it. So if I need to flip it back or turn it to the side before I connect the patient to the lines, I make sure I'm trying to get all the air out. Okay. So that was like 2 for 1 if you caught that. This one. Not putting in patient prescription before starting patient. What I mean is not putting in their goal, not putting in their dialysate, not putting in their time. That's a big mistake. Not putting in their time will mess you up because most of these machines are automatically set to 3 hours. So if your patient runs for 4 hours and you never step back and make sure that you put in your patient prescription time for 4 hours, then guess what? They're going to run 3 hours. And when you are getting ready to take them off, i.e., I did this before, and I was like, why is it saying I'm ending the treatment early? Because you are. They have an hour left. The devastation in having to tell a patient they have an hour left. It's not funny, but it's funny. Whew, it's funny now. Wasn't funny then. Anyways, so yeah. So, and I say patient goal as well because I remember she desperately needed to take off 3. Y'all, I was rushing. That's why I be telling people take your time during changeover and make sure you step back and double check your stuff. I stepped back, looked for a second, but didn't look good enough. Just made sure they was running and made sure I had no air. Came back later, even in doing my 30-minute checks, I didn't catch it. Instead of setting the patient for 3, i.e. 3,000, I set the patient for 300. Oh, she was pissed. You hear me? Pissed. Anyways, needless to say, now, when I set my machine, as I'm talking to the patient, mind you, the nurse was to double check with this, but I didn't always leave it up to the nurse to double check because you have some nurses who will double, triple check, and you have some nurses who won't check at all or won't go back behind you and look at all of that. But I've worked with some nurses lately that they checking everything. They making sure everything's straight or everything is what the prescription say and everything is, okay, you say you pulling off this, but they might want to pull off this. And of course I'd be like, hey, that's y'all job. Do what you want to do. If something happened with the patient, I guess I gotta deal with it. Now sometimes I'm mad if they cause them to be cramping repetitively throughout the week or throughout weeks. Then I'm gonna say, hey, or adjust that goal because ain't nobody got time for that. I don't like patients cramping. I don't like patients throwing up. I don't like patients passing out. All right. Anyways, and I understand that you have to get fluid off of their lungs. I understand all of that, but I also understand there's gotta be another way. So, anyways, before I go into rant to about that, let's keep talking about our mistakes here. Ha! My God. Not double, triple checking to make sure you have the right patient name pulled up on the schedule to match where the patient sits. Let me tell you, as a floater, this has been crucial to my life. You want to know why? Because on the schedule, it says patient Johnny sits in chair A. Patient Susan sits in chair B. On the schedule, that's what it says. They come in, Susan sits at A, Johnny sits at B. And I go to and I'm thinking I done checked. No, double, triple check. Because then put the patient on, do all of that. This you gotta be there. Okay? Be present at work, guys. Work on it. I know we be tired sometimes. But this is my confession of mistakes that I've made. So yeah, notice that I put her information in his chart because she sat where he said was supposed to sit on the schedule. Now, this is my fault. 50-50, okay? 50% my fault. 50% not my fault. The other 50% is whoever makes the schedule. Come to find out, because I talked to the clinic manager, she was like, I don't know why they do that. Well, if you work the floor or if you talk to the staff, and it's not all the clinic managers, so don't come for me, but you can come for me in the comments if you want, but this is not every clinic manager. But I'm just saying in general, whoever is making the schedule needs to talk to everybody or just observe for a second, because ever since I had been coming to that clinic, I also noticed that these patients they sit in certain spots. That might be because that works for the tech or the nurse, or whoever's working there consistently. Because a lot of a lot of the clinics that I was going to, like, a tech had a assigned pod. I personally don't care for assigned pods because I like to look at different patients and be on a different side. I just like a change of scenery, okay? But anyways, so that was the case with that. And I do understand schedule wise, it is like a certain time frame that it has to be. So that was conflicting. Like, it was a lot of conflicting things and discrepancies with that. So that's why I say 50-50, because 50% was y'all fault and 50% was my fault, because as the person caring for these people, I should have um, made sure I looked and seen who was in that chair and who was on the screen. I ended up getting it fixed. I fixed it, but it's like and I've never worked in a hospital, but it's like when you're in the hospital and they're like, "Are you such and such?" Like me, "Are you Ebony?" Blah blah blah. Yes, I am. Boom. So, do I do that on all the good days? Yes, I've done that. But that was a bad day. That was a rough morning at that moment. But anyways, again, I fixed it. I spoke about forgetting to clamp saline line. Forgetting to put the venous line in the air chamber. But don't worry, your machine will let you know that you didn't do it, because it's going to be going off. And you're going to be like, why do you keep going off? Because your air chamber is not clamped per se. So like the venous, y'all know what it look like, how the venous chamber and the air chamber, how they're in there together. If the venous line is not in the air chamber, then we're going to have issues, because that means that, and the machine is going to alarm because it's letting you know that this is happening, because air can get to the patient and we don't want that. Okay. So I typically, so I don't forget, I like to set up my machine to where once my machine tests with the venous line in the air chamber. I noticed when I first started dialysis, and even, just throughout the years, I've noticed like a lot of old school people, they hate it. They hate the venous line in there. I don't know if it was how the machines were programmed in the past. I have no idea, but your girl likes to set up the machine with the venous line in the air chamber while it is testing. If it fails a test, I'll take it out to see if that makes a difference or not, because it may or may not just be that raggedy machine that day. Okay. Ooh, Jesus. One other, forgetting to close the wall drain. So, because I floated and went to different clinics, some clinics have the wall drains where you have the acid and bicarb and all that. Like, some of those, you either have to turn a knob to cut the water on to go to the machine, because if you don't, it's going to say no, the machine will say no water. But some of those are fine. You don't have to do that. You don't have to touch anything. All you got to do is put in your it's not Hanson's, my God, what's the name of things now? All you got to do is put in your acid and bicarb into the wall, and boom, you're good. Well, because every clinic doesn't have that. When I went to do it one day, oh, I had a flood in the clinic. I was like, Jesus. And then the other tech was helping me, and she was like, turn the knob. And I'm like, what knob? And she just like reaches over and like, I was like, oh my gosh. So that was a mess to clean up. But anyways, when I used to open and close, oh my gosh, not making enough bicarb. Oh, it was the worst, because you're mid shift, you're mid changeover, and you're getting an alarm, and then all the machines, and then you got to put them in bypass. Oh, it is horrible and gut wrenching, because the lives of these patients are in your hands. So yeah. Not making enough bicarb, or there could even possibly be a leak in your uh tanks or whatnot. But seems it, oof, that's rough. I've had too many days like that. Too many to count. Too many to count. Um, Infiltrating a patient. That will happen. Once someone told me this is one of those, like, you can't get around infiltrating a patient. I've seen 20-year vets, OGs, I call them, infiltrate a patient. You don't infiltrate a patient on purpose. You don't. It happens on accident. So for everyone that's infiltrated a patient and you feel like crap after doing it and after it happens, just know it's okay. It's okay. Okay. Um, Especially if it's a brand new access, give yourself some grace and mercy, because with brand new accesses, depending on how the fistula is developed, if the patient is using their little stress ball thing, depending on how the patient is using their arm at home, that will determine a lot. That will determine the growth of that fistula, where I like to call it, like, I'll tell the patients, like, oh, you got a teenager now, you don't have a baby. So yeah, you can definitely infiltrate. And then if it's curved, if the tourniquet is on too tight, it can infiltrate. Or if the tourniquet is on too loose, it can infiltrate. It depends on the patient's access, and every patient's access is different. So be careful out here. But don't be afraid to do that. I mean, don't do that. Don't try to do it intentionally. Nobody does. Okay. Nobody does. Anyways, all right. Ooh, this is a good one. Not checking the patient brew or thrill and sticking the patient anyway. So, in the past month or two, I have had 2 or 3 patients in my pod, and this is at different clinics who whose access is clotted off. I didn't stick them. One, not gonna lie, I think one of them I did, but I went. It was a couple of them that I didn't stick them because someone called me over. I felt for it, and this happened to me like last week. I felt for it, and I was like, I don't feel anything. I listened to it. I said, I don't hear anything either, and so I go to them, and I'm like, I don't feel anything, and I don't hear anything. And they're like, you can't, you're not gonna try it. I was like, I don't feel anything or hear anything. It's one thing, honestly, it's one thing when you don't hear anything, because some accesses I've heard them like really deep. So the sound is just so faint to where if I at least feel it and you feel the rush, I like to call it, like, it feels like a rush, a waterfall in the arm. Like, you can feel it, even if it's deep, and you just, like, sometimes I've seen like text like, OG, close their eyes for a second to really feel it. And you can feel it. But if I don't see it, hear it, or feel it, it's done for. So guess what the nurse did? In Texas done this too. She went ahead, she went for it. And I was like, oh, you got it. Because I'm not doing it. And guess what? Patient's access was clotted. Was nothing. It was like dark black blood, which means it was a clot, so it really wasn't blood. And sometimes you can stick a patient's access and it clots, and you can suck the clot out. You can aspirate it out. You can suck the clot out with a 10 cc syringe. But this was not the case. I knew the access was done for. He needed to go to vascular, or I like to call it sleep. He needed to go to vascular. And then I said, when is the last time you've been to vascular? And he's like, I haven't been since I got it. And I was like, what? How is this possible? That's a rant for another day. Anyways. All right. Another mistake I have made. Oh my God. Forgetting to clamp the arterial or venous line when disconnecting a patient. You want to talk about blood? You want to talk about blood? Anytime. That's probably happened to me like 5 times in my whole, like 6 years of doing dialysis. But you want to talk about blood, like especially when I first started. Oh my gosh, because you're trying to hurry up and da 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 da, and patient is looking at you, and you feel like your coworker is looking at you, and you're like, I'm trying to hurry up and trying to get fast. Nah, forget that. I slow down now. I take my time. I go by my pace. My pace is fast, but I still go by my pace. So, anyways, taking the patient off, and they might be talking to you too. Sometimes, if a patient is talking to me while I'm taking them off, I might be listening. Then I'll be like, or if I'm putting them on and they're talking to me, I might listen in. But if I need them to be quiet for the moment, so I can like concentrate and process what I'm doing, so I don't make a mistake, then I'll say, "Hold on, one moment. Give me 1 second." It's nothing wrong with doing that. It's nothing wrong with doing that. So I'd be like, hold on, give me 1 second. Let me listen to this real quick. Let me finish this real quick. Cause I don't wanna make no mistakes. I don't wanna mess you up. So, or I don't even say that. I just be like, hold on. It depends on the patients. You gotta know your patients. Cause some of them can't take that. So I just be like, hold on 1 second, hold on. They get quiet. And then boom, clamp, 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 clamp. But if not, you're gonna have blood everywhere. Okay? I've forgotten that. Again, handful of times. Whew. And then when you're new, they just be looking at you like, oh my God, you're trying to kill me. I'm like, no, I'm not trying to kill you. I just forgot for a second because you clamp real fast when that happens. Oh, or I've had like when you clamp the line and you're disconnect the patient and the clamp and the line has like twisted, so then blood still coming out, and you'd be like, why is there still blood coming out? Well, you literally have to like unclamp and clamp real fast. Shout out to us. Okay. The next one is having the line in the air detector below the venous chamber while priming. While priming, I did this and I was like, why every time I come to prime, my saline bag is not getting lower? Well, it was because remember I said I set up my machine. When it's time to test it, I put my venous line in the air chamber. So because of this, I was moving too fast and ended up setting up the machine like it was getting ready to test when I was actually doing it to prime it. But I was going so fast, I missed a step, or I was just ahead of myself. So I remember coming back to the machine like, why is it not? And then I took that step back, like, and I looked at the line, and I followed it, and I said, oh my God, how could we forget that? How? So yes, when you open it up, it's gonna breathe. But if your saline bag is not moving and you primed it, you press that prime button, you see the pump moving, and you're like, why is it not priming? Check your air detector chamber. See if your line is in there. If your line is in there while it's priming, it's not going, the machine is set to prime, it's not going to prime. It's just not going to do it. So amen to the machines, because I mean, that's good. It's going to let you know a lot of things. Did I say everything that I put on here? Ooh, this is the last one. Your ultrafiltration rate exceeding the limit. There are calculations for a reason, so that oh, hit the mic. I gotta get used to this thing, y'all. Is it still on? Okay. So that the heart won't so they won't have a heart attack on your machine. And so we don't pull too much off of them. There's so many things that could go wrong with exceeding the limit. So always consult with your nurse about the numbers. If you feel like your calculation is off, always consult with your nurse, okay, as you are setting these patients up for these machines, because one wrong move, and this is not to scare anybody, but it's the truth. Like what we do as technicians, as dialysis technicians, and as the dialysis nurses and all the other jazz, like what we do as dialysis workers that are patient care, that are one-on-one patient care workers, is life or death for them. It's repetitive, and things like that don't happen all the time, but that doesn't mean they can't happen. So you just have to be alert, aware, prepared, and ready, and observant. And check your own work. Don't wait for nobody to come behind you, because you know you're gonna be mad if somebody else come behind you and tell you you ain't do this or you ain't do that. Even though it is the RN's job to do that, by the way. Okay, I didn't like it. Okay, because who wants somebody to tell them what to do? Nobody don't want nobody to tell them what to do like that. We all grown, but I have learned and have grown to be okay with it, because it helps me to double check and make sure I have everything put together before, everything situated, all my numbers in. I have my jug, I have my the right potassium. This is a part of the patient's prescription. I have the right potassium, or the right calcium. I have the right bath for that patient. Whatever they need medically as it pertains to the machine and everything that's about to go in their body. I make sure I have all that. I make sure I see if they're allergic to alcohol. So then you got to use is it the chloroprep? I'm not sitting in front of it, y'all, so I can't remember the name of the stuff right now. But some patients are allergic to alcohol. Some patients are allergic to betadine, or iodine. Like you need to read the chart. If there's absolutely nothing in the chart, honestly, that often alarms me at times. But if I notice throughout the clinic, if I'm going in patients, I'm looking as I'm doing their vitals and stuff, and I see like, oh, okay, well, they're actually fine. They don't need nothing in their chart, then they're fine. So anyways, those are my mistakes I've made as a patient care dialysis technician. Can you down below tell me some of the mistakes you made, and have you made some of the same mistakes I made? Let me down below. Make sure y'all like, comment, and subscribe, and share, and subscribe, and subscribe, and subscribe. Bye, y'all.